Welcome back. The president speaking with House GOP members this morning about the budget bill, telling representatives he's tired of so-called grandstanding and not to mess with Medicaid. Joining us this morning is Tobin Marcus, Wolfe Research head of U.S. policy and politics. Tobin, it's good to have you. As we watch some of this sausage get ground, you do think this ends up happening, although not easily, right?
I do. I think that they have to succeed, and so they will ultimately succeed in getting this bill done. We've been expecting July as the likely time frame for final enactment of the bill, ahead of the twin deadlines of the long August recess, and even more importantly, the debt ceiling X date, which will probably fall sometime in August. That's a really immovable deadline that they're in a very, very tough spot if they can't get this done in advance of it. But I think between here and there, we've still got about 10 weeks, and I think there are going to be some twists and turns.
What's your thinking now, given some of the long-term debt concerns versus policy that's going to be somewhat stimulative to the economy?
Yeah, so this bill, in our reckoning, looks like it is expansionary over the next few years. Not so much this year, but in 2026, those numbers get pretty material, a little over 80 basis points of GDP. And over the long term, you know, if you fully extend the expiring provisions in this bill, which I think is a reasonable expectation, it's about $3.7 trillion in addition to the deficit relative to current law. That, I think, is well within the range of expectations for what the cost of this bill would be coming into this year. But I do think that markets are starting to tune into that now. So, I think it's a story about upward pressure on the long end of the yield curve, about term premia. I don't think it's big enough to kind of tip us into some acute bond vigilante crisis. But, the fiscal situation is bad and getting worse, and we're seeing that in the long end of the curve.
Yeah, it's certainly paying attention to it more. Moody's warning only sort of reinforcing that. The fact that the headline from the president is "Don't F around with Medicaid," is this finally going to quiet all the Democrats that have been fear-mongering about Republicans and the president wanting to cut Medicaid and your health care?
Well, so the bill does have about $715 billion of Medicaid cuts in it right now. I think the president's message in this meeting was to tell the conservative hardliners not to push for further cuts to Medicaid, where they had been pushing to accelerate the work requirements in the bill, to add in some cuts to the funding for the ACA expansion population. So even if you freeze it as it currently exists, there's a quite substantial amount of Medicaid savings they've built into the bill that some senators on the Republican side, like Josh Hawley, have raised concerns about. So, the Democratic ads write themselves. They have a lot of muscle memory about running against healthcare cuts. I think they were planning to do that regardless of what the bill looked like, but they certainly do have a target there.
Yeah, we're going to get a chance to hear what the Senate thinks about all that, which will add another layer of complexity later on. Tobin, thank you. Good to see you. Tobin Marcus over at Wolfe.